Welcome to Seeking the Lost with Earl Barnett. This program is sponsored by some area churches of Christ and is dedicated to spreading the everlasting gospel as revealed in the Holy Scriptures. The churches of Christ accept the Scriptures as totally inspired of God and the all-sufficient guide for faith and practice. Therefore, they reject all doctrines of men and rely totally on the Bible to direct their course in serving God. It is our pledge to you that each lesson will be the truth as revealed in His holy word. Mr. Barnett carefully prepares the graphics so you can clearly see the book, chapter, and verse of each lesson taught. We urge you to either copy the scriptures used or record this program for further study. If you have any questions or comments, or if you need prayer, the Seeking the Lost ministry can be reached toll-free at 1-800-390-7734. It is our prayer that Seeking the Lost will be an important source of information about God's Word and will help you more perfectly worship Him. And now, here is Mr. Barnett.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to the Seeking the Lost broadcast. I'd like to talk to you about dinosaurs. We hear a lot about them, and of course, it's every year or two they dig up something else, different fossilized evidences that these creatures existed. There's no doubt in my mind that these creatures existed, and I hope there's none in yours because the fossil record is too great. But let's look at this. Did the dinosaurs inhabit the earth millions of years before man existed, or did they coexist? I submit to you that they coexisted, and I'm going to show you some proof of that in just a moment. Why doesn't the Bible mention dinosaurs, or really does it? It's interesting to look into the scriptures and say, well, if there were dinosaurs, surely that God would have called them that and described them. Well, let's look at this right here. The dinosaurs did exist. I've actually seen a model of the Tyrannosaurus skeleton referred to as T-Rex. It is a huge reptile, and that's what the word dinosaur means. It means terrible lizard. And they had this display up at the Huntsville Space Center, and myself and some members of the family went up and seen it, and it is truly an awesome sight. And you know that they roamed the earth one time or the other. Were these creatures in Eden? Somebody would say, well, I don't know. We know that God created all the land animals, including man, created them on the sixth day of the day of creation. And a lot of these, of course, are just an artist's conception of what they perhaps look like. But did mankind, did they coexist with the dinosaurs that we know of in the past? Something I want to say to you that we've seen all of these models of Tyrannosaurus Rex and those things and different fossilized skeletons of animals all over the world. But I'm going to show you one that's found in Walker County, Alabama. And if you'll excuse me for stepping off the camera just a wee bit, I thought you might like to look. Now, this is not mine, it's borrowed, but it was found in Walker County. And this is a femur bone of a mammoth. And somebody would say, well, it looks like it's pretty heavy. It weighs, I guess, 20 to 30 pounds. But I thought you might like to see, excuse me being off camera, but I thought you might like to see something that actually was found here in Walker. Now, where in Walker County it was found, I don't know. I wish I did. There's bound to be more there, don't you think? But that was sent off to the University of Alabama, who confirmed that it was a femur of a mammoth. And so they were right here in Walker County. And we have to accept that fact because, you know, you have to explain something about that particular bone. But why doesn't the Bible mention dinosaurs? Or did it? Since the word dinosaur does not appear in the scriptures, critics claim this discredits the Bible. Now that's foolish, isn't it? Because look, the Bible doesn't mention a surf. It doesn't mention a comet. Does that mean that the Bible's untrue because it doesn't have those particular words? It doesn't mention a hurricane per se. Because these are names that we have invented through the years, talking about we, the human race. No one claims that this would discredit the Bible because you can't find the word comet or surf or a hurricane or 100 other things that has really come into existence in the last few years in the computer age. But where did the word dinosaur come from? A person by the name of Sir Richard Owen in 1841 coined the term dinosaur from Greek words meaning terrible lizard. And so when you think about a dinosaur, you're thinking about a terrible lizard. The scriptures were completed in the 1st century. Now that would be about 1,700 years before the invention of the word dinosaur. So that's the reason it's not in there. But does the Bible say anything about animals that we would refer to as dinosaurs? Does the Bible mention or describe animals that we would call dinosaurs? I think it does. Since the word dinosaur does not appear in the scriptures, critics claim that the scriptures are wrong because it doesn't mention it. Go back one, please. We look back in the book of Job, and you can see that he is describing something that we don't know anything about. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Sound like just out on a fishing expedition. Can you put a reed through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Can you just string him up like you'd string up a bunch of fish? Will he make supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever, hook into a plow or something like that? He's talking about what? He's talking about Leviathan. He says you can't do it. Can you lay your hand on him? And this seems to describe what actually happened to a person or persons, that they laid their hands on him or tried to capture. He said, remember the battle. Never do it again. In other words, a person would go away from that battle to trying to tame Leviathan or to hook him up, that I bet I'll never do that again. Indeed, any hope of overcoming him is false. He is a huge animal. Shall one not be overwhelmed at the sight of him? No one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. You find him sleeping somewhere, you leave him alone. And God was saying this about a huge animal, apparently a dangerous animal. And he is saying, who then is able to stand against me? If you cannot stand against one of my greatest creations, you think you can stand against me that made it? What is God describing there? There is an allegorical reference to Leviathan in the book of Isaiah having to do with God's judgment on the enemies of his people. Now, an allegorical, in other words, it's like this. In the day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan. Well, it wasn't actually the animal Leviathan, was it? It was those enemies of God's people. But he describes him about Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. And so what he is saying, God is saying, I'm going to take care of your enemies. And he referred to him, allegorically speaking, he referred to him as a Leviathan. And of course, they understood that. Would the statement make any sense to a people who were completely ignorant of Leviathan, the dragon of the sea? Of course not. When he mentioned Leviathan, to whom those words were written, they understood it perfectly. Remember that the aquatic animals survived the flood without being in the ark. And so here is an animal that we don't know nothing about except this description that is found in the scriptures. And so when you think about what science teaches today, they have a paradigm, they have a philosophy that cannot be shaken. Why the dinosaurs lived and died 65 million years before man came to the earth. The more man evolved, what they would say. My friend, that's not true. And as you look at these things here, these descriptions, you know that it's not true. And there's more evidence that I'm going to show you in just a moment. But just think about that. The statement when he talked about Leviathan made sense to the people to whom he was speaking, because they knew what Leviathan was. What is God describing to Job again? Look at what he refers to as behemoth. You know, we say something large, we say something massive, and we even use the word behemoth, that this particular machine is a behemoth. What does that mean? It means that it's one of the largest that you've ever seen. But God is describing something that he referred to as behemoth in the book of Job. Look at behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What was that now, God? He said, I made behemoth along with you. Sounded to me like at the same time, does it to you? What strength he has in his loins. What power in the muscles of his belly. Talking about behemoth now, not Leviathan. His tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. What is he talking? He's talking about an animal that we don't know anything about. Now, in the past, people have tried to compare this to some animal existing here on the earth. It doesn't work, because once I read a commentary where they thought that it was a hippopotamus, or it might have been an elephant or something, a huge animal on the earth. Well, it just doesn't work, because this doesn't describe the idea that his tail sways like a cedar. Anybody seen a picture of a hippo knows that he has a very small tail, so does an elephant. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. Where is this found? It's found in the book of Job. And did you know that the book of Job is one of the, it's supposed to be actually, the first book ever written. It is the first book of the scriptures ever written. But he says about this behemoth, he said, I made him along with you. So God in his creative days made behemoth. Continues about behemoth. He says he ranks first among the works of God. Now what does that mean? Apparently it means size. He's the biggest thing I've ever made. Yet his maker can approach him with his sword. The hills bring him their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus tree he lies hidden among the reeds in the marsh. You can't approach him, but his maker can. The lotuses conceal him in their shadow. The poplars by the stream surround him. When the river rages, he's not alarmed. Let her flow. He is secure, though the Jordan should surge against his mouth. Can anyone capture him by the eyes or trap him and pierce his nose? You going to tame this one? Of course not. In other words, he is the first of all his creation. He is apparently the largest thing he's ever made. Well, there's not an animal on earth that fits the description of behemoth except maybe Brachiosaurus. We learn so much about dinosaurs these days that they're actually able to put them in different species and separate them somewhat. But this is Brachiosaurus. And as I look here, then he would have a tail like a cedar, wouldn't he? The strength is in his legs. And so Job was describing something. And remains of these animals have been clearly seen, displayed, the fossilized remains. Well, anyway, interesting observations. Oh, you think that animals, the dinosaurs didn't live with animals? What? The petroglyphs, what is that? That's drawings are carved on rocks of dinosaur-like creatures have been found all over the world. Well, let's see what we're talking about. It was discovered in 1879, and it was documented in 1924 by a scientific expedition. What are we talking about? We're talking about Native American rock art carved into the walls of the Grand Canyon. Now this I would like to see. It seems that Dr. Charles W. Gilmore, curator of the Vertebrate Paleontology United States National Museum, had work in this. The resulting publication reported the fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur. Now listen, you can't draw something that you've never seen, can you? Draw me an alien of Mars, if there were any aliens on there. You say, well, I don't know what they look like. How can I draw it? The same thing is true of this prehistoric man. He had to have seen something that looked like that, don't you think? On the walls of the Grand Canyon, a pictograph and Natural Bridge National Monument of a man and what appears to be a brontosaurus is found here. Now look at this right here. There's a man and a dino or a dinosaur there. We're going to show you something that'll help you to look at it. An enhanced view of the man and the dinosaur at Natural Bridge National Museum. Well, now, that is not any animal that I've ever seen. But I know that this fellow saw it. How else would he know the details of it? Interesting. Here's something else. The magnificent jungle temples of Cambodia, rediscovered in the 16th century. At the front entrance is a 10-foot column covered with decorative circles. So, what else is in there? Well, look here. And one of the animals enclosed in these circles is what we would call, scientists have called, a stegosaurus. Look here. It's an animal that has these things on his back. You think they might have seen one, or they just dreamed that up out of the air? Well, of course, we found, the fossils of them, and we know what they look like. You think that man, then, that he could carve the likeness of an animal that he had never seen? It's really strange when you get to looking at the evidence. And people are so set that they want to believe that the animals, all the dinosaurs died 65 million years ago. And, man did never see them, did not live with them. Well, I don't think so. That doesn't fit everything. The evidence shows that people down through the ages have been very familiar with dragons or dinosaurs. The Bible describes such creatures. There's a tremendous amount of historical evidence that such creatures live right beside people. Look at this right here. This is something new. This is something really new. And a well-preserved T-Rex skeleton unearthed in the United States in 1990 was brought to the Montana State University lab. Doing the research here, I found that as they were lifting it up by a helicopter, somehow or another the line broke or it fell and it broke in two. They don't usually break a fossilized bone. It's rock. They don't usually try to break it. It was noticed that some parts deep inside the long bone of the leg had not completely fossilized. Well, what do you know? Here was something that looked like their blood vessels, and it contained what looks like red blood cells, doesn't it? In other words, what am I saying? I'm saying that this shouldn't be. If it was fossilized 65 million years ago, you shouldn't be seeing this kind of organic tissue within it. What is the significance of finding tissue not fossilized inside a fossilized bone? To find an unfossilized dinosaur bone is an indication more consistent with the young age for the fossils, not 65 million years ago. Now you think about that. If that is organic tissue, and it is, it should have been fossilized along with the rest of the bone, shouldn't it? Well, 65 million years ago, that's a long time, in the process, but think about this. The evidence of hemoglobin and the still recognizable shapes of red blood cells in unfossilized dinosaur bones is powerful testimony against the whole idea of dinosaurs living millions of years ago. It speaks volumes, though, for the Bible's account of a recent creation. You stop to think about all of this, and you say, well, did God create the heavens and the earth, or did evolution, or did he use evolution to do it? A lot of argument on that, but this right here is a surprise blow. In other words, it's somewhat like a sucker punch to the scientists that say that we hold this idea that the earth is very, very, very old and dinosaurs died a very, very long time before man appeared. Well, the evidence is showing that that's not true. What about the rock records? Does the rock records prove the earth is billions of years old? I want to show you something that many people don't know and they won't be told. Mount St. Helens, some of you remember that thing blowing up. The new lava dome, the dacite from the Mount St. Helens was formed in 1986. In 1997, 5 specimens were taken from this dome. Apparently when a volcano explodes, well, of course it throws everything out, but then the lava settles back down and it begins to harden from the top, and that's called a dome. And they took these 5 different, they took samples from 5 different locations, remember that, and subjected them to conventional potassium-argon dating. The results indicated ages of 1/2 to almost 3 million years old, all from the same 11-year-old rock. So what are we saying? Do rocks prove that the earth is millions and billions of years old or not? Well, what am I saying here? It's saying that those rocks were formed, when Mount St. Helens blew up. And 11 years later, they go in here and they take samples from different places on the dome. And of course, they indicate there's a wide range there. Let's look. There's a wide range. This volcanic rock was formed in 86. When dated by potassium argon, the results were so erroneous that a person would have to be out of his mind to accept them. Yet the evolutionists assure us that when rock of unknown age is dated, the results are absolutely accurate. And that sample of rock that was formed in 1986, that it had, some of them said, well, this rock is this old. Same rock now. Oh no, this rock, it's this old. You see the wide range here? The wide range, and somebody said, well, I couldn't accept that data. Well, scientists, evolutionists, they accept that data all the time. And not only that, they insist that it be taught to your children in school, that the earth is billions and billions of years old. Well, I don't know if you can run up on the rocks, do you? Why is this lesson important, though? Someone would say, well, it's very important. Think about this. God was an eyewitness of what happened. Therefore, the Bible is the inspired account of the creation and the devastating global flood. He was an eyewitness. And so an eyewitness could give you an accurate account. Not hearsay, but an eyewitness account. He was an eyewitness of what had happened, and therefore to contradict him is to call the eyewitness a liar. Many modernists attempt to discredit this eyewitness by their assertions and outright attacks on the Bible. I don't know why it is, but they just really think that it's necessary. Sometimes I think they believe that it's necessary to prove that they've been educated, that they have to be loyal to the paradigm of the educated, of academia, that they just got to show that they don't believe in the Bible. Well, an honest person will look at the evidence. Many modernists attempt to discredit this eyewitness by their assertions and outright attack on the Bible. Well, that'll be someday. The enemies of God want everyone to believe that the fossil record totally contradicts and disproves the Bible. That's not so either. And there's many of a child that's in the schools that they say, well, we learn today in science, we learn that the Bible can't be true because it says that the earth is only 6,000 years old. That's the devil's lie. The Bible never says how old the earth is. Never. Now, there have been those who have tried to date, the beginning of the earth. They've tried to date it by by the ages of the prophets and events that they would research back and try to stick them together like a huge jigsaw puzzle, so to speak. And they would, well, a timeline would be a better idea, that this happened here and this event fits over here. And they go all the way back and they say, well, before the flood, it was 4,000 years. Well, this was what Bishop Ussher, that he came up with the flood occurred 4,000 years BC. Well, there's no way of really knowing that. And then, of course, they would get to the Mosaic Age, and they say, well, the Mosaic Age, that can be more accurate, that it lasted somewhere between 12 and 15 centuries. And you add that up, of course. And you just figure that, well, the earth here, it's got to be around 6,000 years old. The Bible didn't say anything about how old the earth is. We read in the days of creation that God created the heavens and the earth. But the enemies of God won't ever, they say, we dig up a fossil over here. Well, we know that the Bible's not true. We know. Because this fossil here shows that it's hundreds and millions of years old. Well, could be. Now then, the new evidence about the dinosaur bones. Let's look at this. A well-preserved T-Rex skeleton unearthed in the United States. We've already talked about this. It was brought to the Montana State University lab. It was noticed that some parts deep inside the long bone of the leg had not completely fossilized. This is what would be a blood vessel. Inside that blood vessel, look here what you see. You see this right here. What is that? Well, the people who first looked at it said, why, those are red blood cells. And they were able, even at that time, to squeeze some things out of it. And somebody said, well, I don't know if it's red blood cells or not. Something's been contaminated. Well, scientists don't take, just that, what I believe. They go into research. And this particular person that was working on it couldn't believe what she was seeing. And she said, she talked to her supervisor, and he said, well, prove that it's not. If you want a good approach, prove that it's not red blood cells. At last reporting, they were not successful. What do you think about that? Is the earth all that old? The significance is to find these unfossilized bones is an indicating of a young age of the fossils. The evidence of the hemoglobin and all of these things point to a young earth. Hope you've enjoyed the program. This is Earl Barnett, and you have a good day.
You have been watching Seeking the Lost with Earl Barnett. If you need prayer or have comments or questions, feel free to call the Seeking the Lost Ministry at 1-800-390-7734. That's toll free, 1-800-390-7734. Seeking the Lost is sponsored each week by some area churches of Christ. Until next time, may the good Lord bless you and keep you.